Well, that BBC presenter story has yet more twists and turns, so let's just have a little chat about what's going on. Firstly, I'll repeat my advice of the previous video. If you're thinking about commenting on this on social media or, just generally anywhere, don't. That is my advice, okay? Don't even refer to the allegations, don't even ask questions about it. I mean, people are sort of, wondering about this, well, surely I can just say this is what everybody's talking about. No, like I keep saying, repeating rumours has always been held to be defamatory because you're just, making them wider publicised. Also, we get into all these chase level things, about. So even merely saying, well, this is somebody who's, people are talking about, or this is somebody who there's some evidence about. We've got this thing that, it's enough to say, it's defamatory to say somebody should be investigated. It's certainly defamatory to say there are grounds for thinking this person might have done it, and it's very, very defamatory to say, yes, they definitely did it. So, how do you comment without crossing the line into one of these chase levels? And even phrasing it as a question, people often say that, well, surely it can't be defamatory if you phrase it as a question. Well, it depends, because we all look at what's the average reasonable, hypothetical reasonable person, not too, up for scandal, but not too naive. What are they going to read that as? I mean, if you say something like, what did you spend your armed robbery proceeds on? Well, clearly that's an implication that, a fact that you are an armed robber. But even just like, well, are they talking about you? Is this you? Are you going to deny this? They're questions, but if the court was to hold the underlying meaning was some suggestion that this person may have some level of involvement or may be suspected of involvement, that's enough to cross the line. And defamation cases, they're hideously expensive. First of all, for an allegation like this, you'd be looking at £20,000-30,000 damages, but you've also got the costs. And defamation costs are like ridiculously high. I've told you before that we do this pre-budgeting thing where we have to get a High Court master to sign off on our budgets. But I'll tell you, if you stick something in there that's less than $250,000, it just gets signed. Now, just as an aside, you're all supposed to start defamation proceedings in the King's Bench division in what we call the Media and Communications List. However, if the parties consent, you can actually issue in the county court. Also, sometimes the master will suggest and say, would you like to do this, rather than come to London if you're not London based, would you like to do this in what we call your local district registry? District registries are branches of the High Court sitting outside London, and they're usually part of county courts. But also, they might just say, would you be happy to transfer this to the county court? Interesting, I had a case once in front of the lovely Master MacLeod. She's really sweet. And she suggested, wouldn't you prefer to just have this in your local court because, both parties live near a particular place? And I said, I'd love to do that, but our local court denies that they are a district registry. And she went, oh, Mr. Robertshaw, don't be so silly. Of course they don't. I can just go, I'll transfer it now on my computer. She went on the computer and went, oh, wow, you're right. They haven't put up that they're a district registry just because they didn't want to be swamped with all the work. But yeah, so like I say, these things are very expensive, can be very expensive. What else? Well, now we've heard that the courts, I'm going to call them the victim has denied that there's been any wrongdoing or that they wanted this, person to, suffer any consequences. But is that relevant? Not necessarily. What is the actual offence that we're talking about? Basically, it's being in possession of indecent photographs of a minor. Okay, and that is the offence. It's also an offence to actually distribute them. So the person sending them, if they're underage, also commits an offence. You might think that's odd because, well, hang on, the age of consent is 16, so why can't you do this till you're 18? There is actually an exception, which is if you are under 18, but you're in a marriage or civil partnership and you take the photographs for your own use within the marriage or partnership. And it'd be interesting to see if that, extends to if it's a polyamorous relationship. Probably not, because it seems to imply it has to be a marriage or a civil partnership. Then that's not an offence. But if you distribute them outside the marriage or civil partnership, then, the offence is committed there. It's not a defence to say I didn't realise how old they were. It is a defence to say either you didn't know that they were indecent or you didn't know you had them. You might say, well, hang on, how could that arise? When it comes to photographs like this, the sort of definitions of possession and making and distributing, they're very broad. You make an image. If your computer automatically saves something to the cache, then that is considered to be making or duplicating an image, even if you didn't initiate it. If you're looking at something on screen and your computer saves a temporary file, then basically you are in possession of that because, you know, somewhere on your hard drive. So, like I say, you know, this is an offence that has a very broad reach, and the mere fact that somebody's saying, "Well, I don't want to make a fuss about this," it's not down to them, because the thing with criminal proceedings is the victim isn't a party to the proceedings. They're just a witness. It's the Crown versus the defendant. Now, for this particular offence, you can only bring proceedings with the consent of the Director of Public Prosecutions. Generally speaking, the CPS can bring any case they want, and indeed anybody can bring a private prosecution. But with some offences, and this reflects the sort of complex nature of these cases and how, you know, sometimes they can be very fact specific, you need the DPP's consent to bring the case. But, you know, does it matter? What about the Sun? Are they in trouble if somebody's, you know, now saying, well, I didn't want to make a fuss? Not necessarily. They can argue that it was in the public interest. They didn't name somebody. But we get back into this thing about, can you defame a group? Well, if the group's too big that you can't identify anybody, no. So BBC presenters, arguably that's too big. But what if it were, you know, narrowing down to a specific group of people? You know, could it get to the stage where, well, you know, it's got to be, there's only half a dozen people or a dozen people fit that category. If that casts suspicion on everybody in the group, every single person there has a claim. Okay. Now, I just want to mention something. I had occasion today to speak to some like defamation lawyers, because, you know, I'm a defamation lawyer, so that's kind of what I do. And I did actually chat about this with people, and I do know that, without going into details, that, you know, people are taking this very, very seriously. So, like I say, you know, you don't want to be on the receiving end of any sort of, you know, claim like that. Especially, you know, because you wouldn't be able to defend it. You don't have a public interest defence, probably. You certainly don't have a truth defence, unless you can prove it. And if you're just commenting on other people's idle speculation on the internet, you probably don't. So there you go. That's what's going on, you know, with the general issues. But also, like I say, I'm just reiterating my warning. I mean, you know, don't get me wrong. Nobody loves you or your money more than defamation lawyers. But I'd rather not see anybody watching this actually in that position. So, if you found that useful or interesting, or you just got a bit of sympathy for me, please consider clicking the like button and also perhaps subscribing. And also, like, you know, please keep commenting, because it's really nice to engage with you, and also it just gives me ideas of what to talk about.